Want to hear something crazy? A 72-year-old grandmother just became the most feared person in the criminal world, and it all started at a wedding with bad table assignments. Here's the wild story. I'll never forget my daughter Emma's wedding day, not because it was beautiful though it was, but because of where they made me sit. Table 1-2. Shoved in the back corner, hidden behind a flower display so massive you could hide a small elephant behind it. It was like they thought I was an embarrassing relative they wanted to make disappear into the centerpiece. The flowers were so thick with hibiscus and baby's breath that I could barely see the ceremony. I had to watch everything through a large mirror on the opposite wall. He smiled sweetly at the nervous young usher who'd seated me there. This charming boy had no idea what storm he was about to walk into, and Marcus Thornfield, my daughter's brand new husband, definitely had no clue what was coming his way. Let me back up and introduce myself properly. My name is Sylvia Hartley, and I'm 72 years old. Been a widow for 2 years since my husband Robert passed away 3 days after Emma's wedding. Marcus would show up at my door with legal papers that would make me laugh for weeks, though not in a good way. What Marcus Thornfield didn't know was that this supposedly helpless widow had been keeping some very expensive secrets. That morning had started with such hope. I'd chosen my outfit with the precision of a chess master, preparing for battle. A modest grey dress that whispered harmless widow paired with my grandmother's pearls for just enough dignity to avoid looking pitiful. My hair was done at Martha's salon downtown. Nothing too fancy, just respectable enough for my only daughter's wedding. Mom, you look acceptable, Emma said when I arrived at the venue, already distracted by whatever crisis the wedding coordinator was having with the caterers. Acceptable, like a participation trophy in human form. Not beautiful, not elegant, not even pretty, just acceptable. I watched my daughter glide around the room in our great-grandmother's lace wedding dress, the one beautiful thing our family had managed to keep through the years. Despite financial ups and downs, she looked radiant, absolutely glowing with that new bride energy that makes everyone temporarily forget their own problems and just feel happy. But as the guests filtered in, the social hierarchy became crystal clear, like someone had drawn battle lines with chalk. Marcus's parents swept in like visiting royalty, inspecting the peasants. His mother Patricia was dripping in enough diamonds to blind passing aircraft. She worked the room with surgical precision, air kissing the obviously wealthy and important people while somehow managing to look straight through me like I was a piece of furniture, not even expensive furniture, more like a folding chair someone forgot to put away. Excuse me, told the frazzled young usher, showing him my table assignment card. Believe there's been a delightful mistake. Error, ma'am, he said apologetically, pointing toward my XR right behind the decorative feature. Diplomatically, they put IT was being hidden behind enough flowers to supply 3 funeral homes and a botanical garden. I navigated to my designated exile, which offered a spectacular view of absolutely nothing except hibiscus and baby's breath. From my horticultural prison, I could watch the festivities unfold in that large mirror across the room. There I was, Sylvia Hartley, 72 years of accumulated wisdom and life experience tucked away like last week's newspaper that nobody wanted to read. Ceremony was beautifully, I'll grant them that Emma floated down the aisle like something from a fairy tale, and Marcus cleaned up nicely in his obviously expensive designer suit. His smile was perfect. His vows were touching. Everything seemed wonderful, but during cocktail hurry, noticed something fascinating about my new son-in-law, something that made my internal alarm bells start ringing. Had different smiles, different faces for different people. A megawatt charm, offensive for the obviously wealthy guests, the ones wearing Rolex watches and designer shoes. Practiced politeness for the useful ones, business contacts, people with connections, anyone who might advance his career, and complete indifference, almost coldness, for anyone who looked like they might ask favors instead of offering opportunities. It was like watching a chameleon change colors, except the colors were all variations of fake Mrs. Hartley. I turned to find Marcus himself approaching, armed with his most dazzling smile. One I suspected he reserved for people he was about to manipulate. Isn't this just absolutely magical? He said, gesturing at the reception like he'd personally arranged the sunset outside the windows. You must be absolutely bursting with maternal pride. Ohim practically vibrating with maternal joy, I replied, my voice sweeter than artificial sweetener in diet soda. Though I must say, the view from behind this floral arrangement is quite educational. He either missed the acid dripping from my tone, or chose to ignore it like a seasoned politician. Ignoring inconvenient questions, I was hoping we could spend some quality time together. Soon he continued smoothly. Really? Get to know each other properly. Family is so important, don't you think? How refreshing, I said, taking a sip of my champagne. Most people usually manage that before marrying into the family, but I do admire your commitment to handling things in reverse chronological order. That earned me a microscopic pause and his smile barely a flicker. But I caught it like a hawk spotting a mouse in a field. His eyes flickered with something annoyance calculation. Before the smile returned full force, I was thinking dinner this week. Said just the two of yous have some fascinating ideas about family collaboration. I'd love to discuss family collaboration. How deliciously ominous. The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. Well, do love a good mystery dinner, I said, fanning myself with my napkin like a southern belle. Having the vapors Thursday work for your busy schedule? Perfect. I know this excellent place. Downtown, very private, very elegant, excellent for meaningful conversations. Meaningful conversations about what I wondered, my thrilling stamp collection, my weekly bridge club scandals, the exciting world of senior citizen discount shopping. Can hardly contain my excitement, I said, my voice dripping with false enthusiasm as he glided away to charm more promising prospects, specifically a couple who'd arrived in a Mercedes. I caught my reflection in that mirror. Again, a silver-haired woman in understated clothes, sitting alone behind enough flowers to stock a botanical garden. Someone who looked like she probably shopped with coupons and worried about heating bills. Exactly the image I'd been carefully cultivating for 2 years during the father-daughter dance, which made me tear up because Robert should have been there. I slipped away to powder my nose in the marble ladies' room in that fancy sanctuary with its gold fixtures and expensive hand soap. I touched up my lipstick and practiced my harmless elderly widow expression in the mirror. I looked vulnerable, trusting, a little confused by modern life. Perfect Thursday evening arrived with all the enthusiasm of a dental appointment you couldn't reschedule. I dressed carefully for my role as modest widow, simple black dress that suggested respectability without prosperity, paired with my mother's pearl earrings and Robert's broken watch that still looked dignified from a distance, even though it had stopped working 3 years ago. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was one of those pretentious places where they pronounce water with a French accent, and the waiters look at you like you're personally responsible for their artistic disappointment and failed acting careers. Marcus was already seated when I arrived, looking every inch the successful young executive in his tailored suit and expensive watch. Sylvia, he practically levitated from his chair. You look absolutely radiant. Thank you, dear. This place certainly is something. And it was something, all right, the kind of something that made you wonder if they charged extra just for the privilege of feeling inadequate and poor. We ordered wine. He insisted on a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget and had more syllables than my high school diploma. Then he settled into what he clearly thought would be an easy conversation with a confused old lady, so he began swirling his wine like a sommelier with delusions of grandeur. How are you managing life on your own? It must be challenging. Just brilliantly, I said. 72 years of practice makes most things seem fairly trivial. Of course, but surely it gets overwhelming sometimes. That big house, all those decisions to make by yourself, all that responsibility. Was fishing for information with all the subtlety of throwing dynamite into a trout pond. Robert always said I had enough opinions for 3 people, I replied, so I keep myself thoroughly entertained arguing with myself. He Laughed that practiced boardroom laugh that probably worked wonders on gullible investors and elderly relatives who didn't know better. Wonderful truly, but seriously, Sylvia'd. You worry about practical matters, finances, legal issues, people who might try to take advantage of your generous and trusting spirit. There it was, real topic of conversation dressed up in fake concern, and served with overpriced wine. Should I be worried about something specific? Marcus, not worried, exactly, he said, leaning forward with practiced sincerity, but prepared you know how complicated things can become, especially for someone in your unique situation. My unique situation, like being a widow, was a rare medical condition that needed specialized treatment. And what situation would that be exactly? He leaned forward even more, his voice dropping to that confidential tone men use when they're about to explain something to the little woman who obviously can't understand complex matters well. Living alone, making major decisions without proper guidance, being vulnerable to people who might not have your best interests at heart, people who might try to manipulate or control you. Irony was so thick you could serve it for dessert with whipped cream on top. How incredibly thoughtful of you to be concerned about my vulnerability, I said sweetly. Actually, I've been consulting with my attorney about protective measures for people in situations exactly like yours. Protective measures? How delightfully patronizing. What kind of protection are we discussing? He reached into his jacket with the flourish of a magician. Pulling a rabbit from a hat out came a manila folder, which he placed on the table between us like it was the Holy Grail or the Declaration of Independence. Just some basic paperwork, he said smoothly, nothing dramatic or complicated. Simply legal safeguards in case you ever need assistance making important decisions. I opened the folder with the enthusiasm of someone handling a live rattlesnake. Inside were legal documents that made my blood run cold, even though I kept my face perfectly neutral. Power of attorney, power of financial oversight, medical decision-making, authority, complete control of my life, disguised as loving family concern. This is quite comprehensive, I said, slowly reading through the dense legal language. My lawyer specializes in elder care law, Marcus said proudly. He's handled many cases just like yours, cases like mine. I was apparently a case study, now a problem to be solved. Elderly woman who needed to be managed like a difficult child. How fascinating, and Emma is aware of this thoughtful initiative. Absolutely. She thinks it's brilliant, really, Sylvia. We just want to ensure you're protected from anyone who might take advantage of your trusting nature and generous spirit. My trusting nature. The boy really had done his homework and decided I was an easy mark. Protected from whom specifically? Oh, you know, he said vaguely, waving his hand. Dishonest contractors who overcharge for repairs, questionable investment advisors who prey on the elderly relatives who might suddenly become very interested in your welfare once they think there's money involved, relatives who might suddenly become interested. The irony was absolutely astronomical. How prescient of you to anticipate such problems. It's just common sense, really. These things are much easier to arrange before any complications develop, before questions arise about someone's capacity to make sound decisions. My capacity? He was already laying the groundwork for declaring me mentally incompetent. Well, I said carefully, closing the folder and placing my hands on top of it, like I was blessing it, or perhaps protecting it. This certainly requires very careful consideration. Relief flooded his face like he'd just landed a major client or closed $1 million deal. Of course, take all the time you need. Though he added carefully, my attorney did emphasize that prompt action would be highly advisable in these situations. Prompt action before I had time to think clearly or consult anyone with functioning brain cells who might point out this was highway robbery dressed in a suitie. I'll definitely want to review this with my own legal counsel, I said firmly. His smile flickered like a candle in sudden wind. Your own lawyer? Oh yes, I know it probably seems silly and overly cautious, but I'd feel more comfortable having someone explain it all in terms my simple mind can properly grasp. Sylvia, really think we should finalize this tonight. These matters work best when handled efficiently and quickly. Efficiently. Before I had time to realize I was being systematically robbed by my own son-in-law. I'm quite sure your notary will understand that important life decisions shouldn't be rushed, I said pleasantly. My what, your notary, I said, my voice still sweet as honey. You did bring one, didn't you? You seemed so thoroughly prepared for everything else tonight. The mask slipped completely. The charming son-in-law vanished, replaced by something harder and more calculating. Did you know about the notary? Lucky guess, I said, taking a sip of my wine. You strike me as someone who plans ahead very, very carefully. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to determine if I was genuinely naive or actively resisting his elaborate con game. I could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes. Of course, he said finally, the smile returning, but not quite reaching his eyes this time. Take all the time you need to review everything. But his eyes said something entirely different. His eyes said he was done playing nice games with the harmless old widow who was supposed to sign away her rights without asking questions. Too bad for Marcus Thornfield. This harmless old widow was just getting started playing games with him. I was much, much better at games than he could possibly imagine. The weekend passed with deceptive calm, like the quiet before a massive storm. But I could feel Marcus's impatience crackling through the phone lines like dangerous electricity every time he called. Emma called twice, both times casually too. Casually inquiring about that helpful paperwork Marcus showed you at dinner, still mulling it over. Sweetheart, I told her, these things require careful thought. He's just trying to help Mom. He knows so much about legal matters and protecting people. Legal matters like theft disguised as assistance. Apparently, Monday morning brought a call that confirmed every suspicion growing in my gut about Marcus's true nature. Sylvie, it's Marcus. His voice was tight with barely controlled impatience. I hope you've had time to think about our discussion. Have been thinking about very little else, I said truthfully. Wonderful. I was hoping we could meet again this week. I have some additional information that might help clarify things and make you more comfortable. Additional information, more sophisticated lies. Presumably. How thoughtful of you. Same restaurant, actually, he said smoothly. I was thinking somewhere more private, maybe your home. I could bring some documents that would be much easier to review in a comfortable, familiar setting. My home, where he could pressure me without witnesses, where there'd be no waiters or other diners to overhear if things got uncomfortable. Kind of documents. Just some examples of how these arrangements have helped other families' success. Stories, you might say, success stories about elderly people who'd surrendered their independence to charming predators in expensive suits. That sounds fascinating, I said. Wednesday evening, perfect, around 7 o'clock. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. Spent the intervening days doing what I did best, observing, planning, and preparing for battle. But first I needed to do something I'd been avoiding for 2 years, something that terrified me more than Marcus's threats. Thursday morning, I stood at the top of my basement stairs, holding Robert's old key in my shaking hand. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. For 2 years I'd avoided this moment too, grief-stricken to face whatever secrets my husband had left behind, too scared of what I might find too comfortable in my carefully constructed widow role. Marcus Thornfield had just given me an excellent reason to overcome my reluctance and fear. The basement smelled like old paper dust and Robert's cologne, that particular scent still clinging mysteriously to his clothes hanging in the corner. His desk sat exactly as he'd left it 2 years ago. Crossword puzzles, half-finished, coffee-stained coasters, reading glasses he'd worn for 40 years sitting beside his favorite coffee mug. The safe was hidden behind a panel I'd never even noticed in all the years we'd lived here. It was camouflaged perfectly to look like part of the concrete wall. Robert had always been much cleverer than he let most people see. My hands trembled as I worked a combination he'd written in his final letter to me. Inside, I found documents that made my hands shake even harder. Bank statements showing accounts I'd never heard of, investment records spanning decades, legal papers establishing trusts, and protections I didn't know existed, and at the very bottom beneath everything else here, letter in Robert's familiar handwriting that would change absolutely everything. My dearest Sylvia, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and someone is trying to take advantage of your generous heart. I'm so sorry. I never told you about the money while I was alive. I wanted to protect you. Even from the knowledge of what we had, $33 million, Sylvie. Properly protected in an irrevocable trust and completely legally yours. No one else can touch it. I lived modestly so we could die wealthy. I hid our wealth so you'd be safe from predators after I was gone, exactly like whoever drove you to finally open this safe for $33 million. I sat down heavily on Robert's old chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. The numbers swam in front of my eyes like they were written in water. $33 million more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The letter continued in Robert's careful handwriting. There's a business card in this envelope for Carol Peterson. She's been handling everything since I got sick. She knows about the threats you might face, and she has very specific instructions to help you fight back. Didn't let anyone steal what I spent 40 years building. For you, my love, use every single penny if you have to make them regret the day they decided to mess with my wife. I love you forever, Robert. I found Carol's card tucked in the envelope and called immediately with shaking fingers. Peterson Law Office. How may I help you? This is Sylvia Hartley. I believe my husband Robert arranged for you to assist me. There was a pause, then a woman's voice filled with obvious relief and excitement. Mrs. Hartley, I've been waiting 2 long years for your call. Can you come to my office today? How soon? How about right now, Carol? Peterson's office was nothing like the stuffy, intimidating legal chambers I'd expected. It was modern, bright, with family photos scattered among law degrees and professional certificates. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 50, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Sylvia, please sit down, she said warmly, gesturing to a comfortable chair. Robert told me this day might eventually come. What day? The day someone tried to manipulate you into signing away your rights and independence. She spread documents across her desk like a general laying out battle plans. Papers, investment records, legal protections I'd never dreamed existed. Your husband was remarkably prescient and careful, she said. He predicted someone would approach you within 2 years of his death. Probably through family connections, trying to gain control of what they assumed were modest assets. They're not modest at all, no, they're definitely not. $33 million completely protected in an irrevocable trust that Robert set up years ago. You control everything. But no one else can access a single penny, even if they somehow gained power of attorney through trickery or manipulation. I leaned back in the chair, feeling like I was seeing my life clearly for the first time in 2 years. So Marcus can't touch any of it, even if I had signed his papers. Not a single penny. Robert specifically designed this entire structure to protect you from exactly that kind of manipulation. But more importantly, she leaned forward with an intense look. You now have the resources to make absolutely sure Marcus never tries this scheme again with anyone else. What do you mean? Carol smiled with something that looked almost predatory, like a shark spotting prey. I mean, we're going to destroy him so thoroughly and completely that he'll spend the rest of his life warning other predators about the extreme dangers of underestimating widows. Carol explained we'd work with a prosecutor named Sarah Chen who specialized in elder fraud case. Well, the set an elaborate trap. Sarah explained when we met at her office. You call Marcus, say you've reconsidered everything, that you want to move forward with signing his papers. We record every single thing, his response, his instructions, his timeline. Every word. Then we arrest him the moment he brings a notary to witness the signing. I smiled, thinking of Marcus's desperation, his gambling debts, that Carol's investigation had uncovered his absolute certainty that he'd successfully manipulated a helpless widow. When do we spring this trap? Monday. That gives us the weekend to set up professional recording equipment and coordinate everything with the police. Saturday I spent the entire day preparing for the performance of my life, practicing my grateful widow voice in front of the mirror, rehearsing my lines about feeling safer with Marcus's protection. Getting every detail perfect Sunday brought Emma looking increasingly worried and confused about her new husband's strange behavior. Mom, Marcus has been acting really strange lately, she said, sitting in my kitchen. He keeps asking about Dad's finances, about whether you might have hidden accounts or secret investments we don't know about. What? Did you tell him that I don't know anything about your money, that Dad handled all that stuff? But, Mom, why is he so obsessed with this? I looked at my beautiful daughter, seeing the beginning of doubt in her eyes. Because he needs money more desperately than you realize, sweetheart. How desperately enough to try to steal it from his wife's mother. Emma stared at me, her face going pale. You really think he's trying to rob you? I don't think it, Emma. I know it. The question is whether you're ready to see actual proof. What kind of proof? The kind that will probably destroy your marriage but definitely save your mother. Emma was quiet for a long time, staring at her coffee cup. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes but determination on her face. Show me. Monday morning, I called Marcus and delivered the performance of my lifetime. Marcus, it's Sylvia. I made my voice sound tired and defeated. I've been thinking very hard about our conversation. Oh, his voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the excitement and greed bubbling underneath like boiling water about to overflow. I think you're absolutely right. I do need protection and guidance. I'd like to move forward with those papers as soon as possible. The relief in his voice was audible and almost pitiful. That's wonderful, Sylvia, truly wonderful. When would be convenient for you? As soon as possible, really. This weekend made me realize just how vulnerable and alone I really am. Perfect. I can have everything ready by this afternoon. All the paperwork, everything you need this afternoon. He couldn't even wait a single day. Isn't that rather fast? He let a note of elderly confusion creep into my voice. These things work best when handled efficiently, silly. I'll bring my notary. We'll get everything properly signed and witnessed, and then you'll be completely protected from anyone who might try to take advantage of you. Protected from him. He meant well. If you think it's best, I do. Absolutely. Let's say 3 o'clock at your house. 3 o'clock sounds perfect, dear. After I hung up, Carol nodded approvingly from her position, monitoring the recording equipment we'd installed throughout my living room. Took the bait completely, she said with satisfaction, hook, line, and sinker. Now what? Now we wait for him to hang himself with his own rope. At exactly 3 o'clock, Marcus arrived with his briefcase, notary, and his most trustworthy smile plastered across his face. Had no idea that hidden cameras were capturing every single moment, every word, every gesture. He spread documents across my coffee table with the confidence of someone who thought they'd already won. Sylvia, I can't tell you how relieved and happy I am that you're taking this important step for your own protection. I realized you were absolutely right about all the dangers, I said, my voice quavering slightly. An old woman like me really does need proper guidance from someone younger and smarter. Exactly. Now, these papers will give Emma and me the legal authority to protect all your interests and make important decisions on your behalf. Of my interests, all of them. Financial decisions, medical choices, living arrangements, everything. You won't have to worry about a single thing ever again. Living arrangements. He was already planning to warehouse me in some nursing home, somewhere convenient and out of the way. And this needs to be notarized today. Because delays only create complications and confusion. The sooner we get this properly in place, the sooner you're fully protected from anyone who might try to take advantage of your trusting nature. I picked up the pen with a shaking hand. This is all quite overwhelming. No, it seems complicated, but trust me completely, this is absolutely the best thing for everyone involved. Trust him. Man who was systematically stealing my life while promising to protect it. Signed the first page slowly. Then paused and signed the second page, then I stopped and looked up at him. Marcus, can I ask you something important? Of course. Sylvia, anything. What exactly happens to all my money after I sign these papers? Your money will be professionally managed by people with experience and expertise. No more worrying about complicated investments or confusing bills or difficult financial decisions. Managed by whom specifically? By people who understand these things. People like Emma and me, who have your best interests at heart. People like you. I repeated slowly. Yes, exactly. I signed the third page, then paused again. Marcus, there's something important I should probably mention to you. What's that? I think there might be considerably more money than you realize. Significantly more. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning, like a child seeing presents under the tree. Pure, undisguised greed. More money. Sylvia. Robert may have had some accounts I didn't know about, hidden investments. Perhaps quite substantial ones. How much more money are we talking about, Sylvia? And there it was. Absolute, undeniable greed. The complete confirmation that this was never ever about protecting me. It was always about stealing everything I had. Well, I said, setting down the pen without signing the final page. That's where things get really interesting, Marcus. Do you mean? He looked confused, then alarmed. I smiled, thinking of $33 million. And the perfect trap we just sprung on him like a steel bear. Trap? I mean, you're under arrest, Marcus Thornfield. You have the right to remain silent. Police officers emerged from their hiding places throughout my house. As Marcus's face went completely white with shock and absolute terror. You can't. This isn't he. Can he? Did. Now you're going to learn exactly what happens to predators who make the catastrophic mistake of hunting the wrong prey as they led him away. In handcuffs, I heard him screaming about entrapment and legal challenges, and how this wasn't fair. But all I heard was the beautiful sound of justice being served with a $33 million side order of revenge. The news broke that evening like a bomb going off. Local businessman arrested, an elder fraud sting operation. Marcus's perp walk played on every single television channel, his face a frozen mask of disbelief and rage. Emma called within minutes, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. Mom, have you Donave protected myself from your husband's systematic attempt to steal my independence and my assets? But the arrest, the charges, this will destroy him completely. Good, I said calmly. That was absolutely the point. Emma showed up an hour later, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I sat her down at my kitchen table and played the recordings. Every greedy word Marcus had said. Every calculated manipulation. Every moment he'd revealed his true nature as a predator. He was going to put me in a nursing home. Sweetheart, I said gently, he was going to steal everything your father left me and convince everyone I was too senile to object or understand what was happening. That he loves Mesh, whispered he. Loves what he thought you could get him. I corrected. There's a very important difference. I showed her the financial records Carol had uncovered. Massive gambling debts, the fake business ventures, systematic pattern of targeting elderly widows across multiple states. This isn't his first time, Mayor. Married to a professional predator, a career criminal. She stared at the evidence, her face cycling through denial, anger, heartbreak, and finally acceptance. What am I supposed to do now? Whatever you want, I said firmly, but you'll do it with complete information and truth, not with lies and manipulation. The trial was swift and devastating. Marcus's lawyer tried every possible defense: diminished capacity, entrapment, family misunderstanding, temporary insanity. Nothing worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings were damning. The pattern of targeting elderly victims across 6 states was completely undeniable. They played the audio of Marcus discussing my mental state and his detailed plans for permanent control of my assets. Even his own expensive lawyer looked disgusted. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked down at Marcus with pure contempt. Mr. Thornfield, you systematically targeted vulnerable elderly people, destroyed their independence and dignity, and stole their life savings. You preyed on family trust, exploited family relationships, and showed absolutely no remorse for the lives you destroyed. This court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, 18 years as they led him away. Marcus looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. This isn't over, old woman, I smiled sweetly. Yes, Marcus, it absolutely is. After the trial, Carol and I met with FBI agent Sarah Torres, who had shocking news. Your case exposed an entire elder fraud network, Sarah explained, spreading files across the conference table. 39 confirmed victims across 6 states, total damages approaching $15 million, 15 million stolen from elderly people. I said, feeling sick. What happened to the other victims? Most lost their independence and life savings. Several were placed in nursing homes against their will, while their assets were systematically stolen. 3 victims died while being actively robbed, never knowing what was happening to them. 3 people died. Number hit me like a physical punch. What can we do for the survivors? Sarah pulled out a thick folder. We want to create a comprehensive program that does for other victims what you did for yourself. Legal resources, financial protection, prosecution support, but it needs funding. How much? Initial startup around $2 million, ongoing operations maybe $5 million annually. I thought about Robert's trust, about his letter telling me to use every penny to fight back. Where do I sign? The program launched 3 months later with spectacular results. Within the first week, we'd opened investigations in 12 states. Within the first month, arrested 17 people connected to various elder fraud networks. Within a year, we'd recovered over $40 million. For fraud victims, we'd sent dozens of predators to prison. We'd created a protection network spanning the entire country. But more important, lives sent a clear message: elderly people were no longer easy targets. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I received a letter from Patricia Hoffman, an elderly teacher who'd been Marcus's first victim. Dear Sylvia, I got my house back. The federal program returned everything Marcus stole from me, plus damages. But more than that, I got my confidence back. I am no longer afraid. Thank you for showing us we don't have to be victims. The White House ceremony took place on a crisp October morning. I sat surrounded by scientists, artists, civil rights leaders, and one widow who'd accidentally started a war against elder fraud, Mrs. Sylvia Hartley. The president announced for her extraordinary contributions to criminal justice and elder protection. I walked to the podium. I thought about Marcus in his prison cell, probably watching this on television. Thank you, Mr. President. 2 years ago was just a widow trying to live quietly. I learned something crucial: trouble doesn't avoid you just because you're polite to it. Laughter rippled through the distinguished audience. When someone tried to steal my independence, I discovered the best defense against predators is becoming a more dangerous predator yourself. Thunderous applause. This medal belongs to every elderly person who's been told they're too old, too confused, too vulnerable. To anyone who preys on elderly people, we're watching, we're organized. While Thunderdon, we're very, very angry. Find a different line of work. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. 2 days after the White House ceremony, I sat in a different kind of room, smaller, grimmer, with fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and unforgiving. This was where Marcus Thornfield would face a parole board that would determine whether he spent the next decade in prison or walking free. Marcus entered wearing prison clothes, looking older and thinner than I remembered. 5 years of federal prison had stripped away all that polished charm, revealing the desperate predator that had always been underneath. His lawyer presented the standard arguments model: prisoner completed rehabilitation programs, expressed deep remorse for his actions, ready to be a productive member of society. Then it was my turn to speak. Members of the board, I began standing up slowly. 5 years ago, Marcus Thornfield targeted me because he thought I was a helpless widow with modest assets he could easily steal. He was catastrophically wrong on every single count. I opened my folder and spread financial documents across the table in front of them. Mr. Thornfield wasn't targeting modest assets, he was attempting to steal $33 million from a widow who had the resources and determination to completely destroy him. Parole board members' eyes widened considerably and destroy him. I did. His criminal operation was completely dismantled. His associates were prosecuted and imprisoned. Victims recovered their stolen assets. His name became synonymous with failure in criminal circles across the entire country. Marcus's face had gone white as a sheet. But the real question today isn't what I did to Mr. Thornfield. The question is whether he's actually learned anything from this experience. I looked directly at Marcus, who was staring at me with barely concealed hatred burning in his eyes. Mr. Thornfield, have you truly learned that elderly people can and will fight back? His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, probably telling him to stay quiet and let the lawyer handle everything. But Marcus couldn't resist responding. Pride and anger won out over common sense. I learned that some people have more money than they deserve, he said bitterly. Room fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. After 5 long years in federal prison, Marcus was still angry and bitter about failing to steal my inheritance, still believed he was the victim, still felt entitled to money that wasn't his, and that members of the board, I said quietly, is exactly why Mr. Thornfield should serve his complete full sentence. He's not rehabilitated at all, he's just angry that his intended victim had bigger teeth than he expected. The parole board deliberated for 27 minutes. Mr. Thornfield